Привет. I'm Chuck Linik, a Ukrainian-American who was baptized with the name Yaroslav, which is also the name that I use in the historical reenactment group, the Society for Creative Anachronism. When I retired from teaching, I decided to take a lot of my research that I'd been doing on Slavic lore and mythology and Slavic history and adapt these to a video format in order to make them more accessible because, quite frankly, I was looking at a stack of notebooks about that high, contained all this research, and I realized this had forced me to access the work. And in order to make it more available to people in the society who might be looking at doing any sort of research on Eastern European and Slavic personae. So, one of the things I've been doing is I've been adapting the stories of the Bogatyr or Bogatyrs, who are the heroes of, Kievan Rus. And when people think of the Bogatyrs, they usually think of this picture. And this contains the three big heroes that are very notable that served at the mythical court of Prince Volodymyr Brightson or Prince Volodymyr Redson. You have Ilya Muromets or Ilya of Murom, who's the super strong one of the group, and he tends to eventually become very religious. Then you have Dobrina Nikitich, who is the protector of women and damsels in distress, who also plays the musical instrument, the guzli, and sings well. So he's the artist of the group. And then there's the one we're going to be talking about today, Alyosha Popovich, or Alyosha, the son of the priest Leontii. Okay, if you get confused about this idea of someone being a son of a priest, Eastern Orthodox priests can get married. And Eastern Orthodoxy is going to be the primary faith in Kievan Rus and in later Russia. Alyosha is connected with Ilya and Dobrina in the popular imagination, and these guys are part of the group called the Young Bogatyrs, as opposed to the elder Bogatyrs who have gone away. And Ilya's the youngest of the young. And so he's not quite as much as a Superman like the rest of these guys. He's cunning, he's egotistical, he likes to make money for himself. On one hand, he's bold and courageous. On the other, he's proud, meddlesome, and crude. He likes to provoke people. He likes to maneuver other Bogatyrs into, attempting quests that seem impossible. And then he's often embarrassed because they achieve the impossible. And he's easily angered. Ultimately, he's kind of a slave to his shortcomings. If you consider Dobrina to be the protector of women, Alyosha tends to take advantage of them. And the irony is he's not a very successful lover, which makes this somewhat amusing. I consider him a jerk. Of all the Bogatyrs, he's going to end up with the most pitiful fate, but that's another story. So that brings us to the story of Alyosha Popovich and Tugarin. Who would tell us of the things of old, and of the things that have been, that of Alyosha, the son of a priest, of Alyosha Popovich, of Alyosha, the brave Bogatyr, who did battle with Tugarin. Across the open steppe rode two young men, close together, deep in conversation. Weary they'd traveled a long way and were trying to decide where to go next. In Suzdal, said Akim, there are many alehouses. If we go there, we will probably get drunk and make bad names for ourselves. Quoth the other, Alyosha Popovich, in Chernihiv there are many pretty girls. If we go there, we will probably also make bad names for ourselves as well. But if we go to Kiev, royal Kiev town, and offer to fight for Prince Volodymyr Brightson, there will only be praise for us. And so they turned their horses towards royal Kiev town. When they arrived at the royal palace of the fair sun, the red sun, they realized all was not well. No grooms appeared to tend the horses, so the two men left them untethered, wandering loose about the yard. With some foreboding, they entered the audience chamber, did reverence in all four directions, as was proper in Kulturny, and lowest to the prince. I am Alyosha Popovich, son of the priest Leontii of Rostov, and this is my squire Akim. Your fame has traveled before you, brave Alyosha, said the prince. Glad I am to see you in the flesh at last. Pride of place you shall have at my table. Sit here by my side, or opposite, or indeed wherever you will. Alyosha chose not to sit near the prince, but atop the peach, the tiled stove, where the humble beggars and those without names sat. From there he watched carefully what was going on, without having to observe the etiquette of the prince's table. In time, the chamber door was flung open. In lumbered a brutish creature, twice the girth of an oak tree, and nearly as tall, his eyes an arrow length apart, his ears a dozen vershoks long. This was Tugarin. He was an ill-bred heathen creature, who did not observe polite or kulturny behavior. Neither crossing himself nor touching his forehead to the floor, he rudely seated himself between Prince Volodymyr and fair Princess Apraxia. Alyosha's blood boiled at this, and he could not contain himself. Volodymyr, Grand Prince of Royal Kiev town, he called, have you fallen out with fair Apraxia that you allow this heathen to sit between you? Food was brought in, starting with roast swan. The monster Tugarin stabbed it with his steel and dropped it whole into his wide mouth. His fat cheeks bulged as he chewed, and he spat the bones on the floor. Again, Alyosha's youthful blood boiled, and he could not contain himself. My father once had an old mongrel. He used to root around under the table, and it choked to death on a swan's bones. I hope Tugarin does the same. A large pie was brought for the next course, and the pie met the same fate as the swan. Again, Alyosha called out, my father once had an old cow that wandered about the yard looking for food. It eventually choked to death. Tugarin, at last, was stung to respond, and the heathen creature asked Volodymyr, who is that holop, that smerd who sits on the stove? He is no holop, replied Volodymyr, but the mighty Bogatyr Alyosha. Quick as a flash, Tugarin threw his knife and flung it towards the stove where Alyosha sat, but the squire Akim caught the hilt as it flew swiftly through the air. At this, Tugarin rose from the table and challenged Alyosha to meet him out on the steppe. Later, Alyosha set off on foot to find Tugarin to make good on the challenge, and on his way he met a holy pilgrim. The pilgrim wore a tall priest's hat and carried a heavy staff weighing nearly 90 poods. Brother, cried Alyosha, lend me your staff and exchange clothes with me. The pilgrim agreed, and Alyosha was soon on his way, hoping to trick Tugarin, whom he expected to ambush him. Not long after, he caught sight of the monster, the heathen creature, who had made himself miraculous paper wings and was flying on horseback high up in the sky. Alyosha prayed for rains, and his prayers were answered. Tugarin's paper wings were ruined by the rain, and he and his steed began to fall to earth. The steed's hooves touched the earth. Tugarin had landed safely. He then recognized his adversary, and intending to crush him to death beneath his horse's hooves, galloped straight towards him. But Alyosha was full of cunning tricks. Just as Tugarin came level with him, Alyosha, the Bogatyr, slid under the horse's long mane so that Tugarin could not see him. Then, when Tugarin was confused and found himself looking the wrong way, Alyosha used the heavy staff of the pilgrim and swung a great blow and knocked Tugarin's head off his body. He took both Tugarin's horse and Tugarin's head proudly to Prince Volodymyr. In this way, the Bogatyr Alyosha Popovich rid the land of Rus of an evil monster. It was at the feast I heard this tale. There it was I drank mead ale. Though it flowed down my beard, my mouth stayed dry, for never a drop passed my lips, swear I.